Some fences are built to keep cattle in. Mine ended up exposing the kind of people who believed the world belonged to them. The first thing I heard that morning wasn't the birds waking up over the Texas prairie. It was the sharp metallic twang of stretched wire followed by a woman laughing like she'd just won some harmless little game. Then came the smell. Fresh laundry detergent drifting across dew-covered grass where only mesquite, cedar, and damp earth were supposed to be. By the time I stepped onto my porch with my coffee still too hot to drink, 3 complete sets of bedsheets were hanging across my ranch fence like colorful flags claiming foreign territory. 5 seconds later, someone shouted my name. Another voice screamed. Coffee splashed over my hand as I watched half a dozen people stumble backward in pure surprise while white sheets slid into the muddy pasture below. Nobody was seriously hurt. The fence had simply done exactly what it had been designed to do. What none of them knew was that the county inspector had signed off on the entire electrical system less than 24 hours earlier. Every warning sign was brand new. Every voltage reading met Texas agricultural code, and every inch of that fence had been documented from post to post. Standing there, I realized this wasn't going to end with another argument over property lines. This was going to become something much bigger. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 41 years old, and my family has been raising cattle on this same stretch of Texas land since long before anyone dreamed of building Willow Creek Estates next door. My grandfather drove the first cedar posts into the soil with a hand maul in 1958. My father replaced them with steel after a tornado flattened half the pasture. I rebuilt the entire fence myself 2 years ago after earning my electrical contractor's license. Not because I enjoy working under the scorching July sun, but because ranch fences aren't decorations. They're working equipment. They protect livestock worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. They separate curious strangers from animals that don't always appreciate company. Around here, every strand of wire has a purpose. Every insulator, every warning sign, every energizer exists because somebody learned a lesson the hard way decades before I was born. Unfortunately, the people who moved into the new subdivision didn't see any of that. They saw a convenient clothesline stretching nearly a quarter mile along what they called their walking trail. They saw free space. They saw somewhere to clip beach towels after pool parties, hang picnic blankets after family cookouts, even dry oversized comforters that wouldn't fit inside expensive suburban dryers. The woman leading all of it was Linda Crawford, president of the Willow Creek Estates HOA. A woman who somehow managed to wear spotless white sneakers everywhere without ever getting a speck of dust on them. Linda loved saying that neighbors should share community resources. The problem was my ranch had never been part of her community, and that fence definitely wasn't one of her resources. I tried smiling. I tried explaining. I even replaced stolen warning signs 3 separate times. Every polite conversation somehow ended with Linda reminding me that my fence sat next to their sidewalk, which in her mind made it everyone's fence. Looking back now, I should probably thank her for saying those exact words, because they became the sentence that started everything. The strange part was never that people crossed onto my property. Ranch owners get used to loose dogs, wandering kids chasing baseballs, and the occasional driver making a wrong turn. Most folks apologize, wave, and move along. That is how neighbors are supposed to act. What made this different was how quickly simple mistakes turned into daily habits, and how those habits slowly became something people felt entitled to. Every Saturday morning I drove the same route along the fence line in my old Ford F-250, checking insulators, tightening loose wire, replacing weathered staples, and making sure every warning sign still faced the walking path. The tires crunched across limestone gravel while meadowlarks called from the cedar trees, and the smell of fresh hay drifted across the eastern pasture where nearly 80 head of black Angus cattle grazed. It was peaceful work, the kind that gave you time to think. My father always told me that fences tell stories. A broken post means a storm came through. Bent wire means a curious steer tested the boundary. Missing signs usually mean people stopped respecting something they never built. I started noticing little things first. Plastic clothespins clipped to the top wire. Bright colored towels fluttering in the afternoon breeze. A beach umbrella leaning against one of my corner posts after a holiday weekend. Someone even wrapped a string of birthday decorations around the steel braces, leaving tape residue that collected dust and insects for weeks afterward. Every time I removed the mess, I convinced myself they simply did not understand what an agricultural fence actually was. So I tried being patient. I walked over to the subdivision clubhouse one Tuesday evening carrying photographs instead of complaints. Linda greeted me with the same polished smile she used at every homeowners association meeting, the kind that never quite reached her eyes. I explained that electric fencing was normal on working ranches, that the Energizer operated on scheduled cycles, and that the warning signs existed for a reason. She listened with folded arms, nodded politely, and thanked me for my concern before telling everyone in the room that good neighbors should not make such a fuss over shared spaces. Shared spaces. Those two words lingered in my head all the way home. The next morning I found twice as many blankets hanging from the fence. It was almost as if my visit had encouraged them. One resident even waved at me while clipping a comforter onto the top strand, smiling like we were participating in some friendly neighborhood tradition. I stopped my truck, rolled down the window, and reminded him that the fence belonged to my ranch. He laughed, pointed toward the sidewalk, and said Linda had already explained everything. According to her, anything bordering the subdivision should be considered part of the community experience. I drove away without raising my voice because arguing with one neighbor would not solve anything if the entire neighborhood believed the same story. That afternoon I ordered new reflective warning signs, larger than the previous ones, bright yellow with bold black lettering that could be read from more than 100 feet away. If people continued ignoring them after that, it would no longer be because they had not seen the warnings. It would be because they had chosen not to. Within 2 weeks, the fence had somehow become the unofficial utility rack for half the subdivision. Every afternoon I found something new hanging from it. Folding chairs leaned against the corner posts after soccer practice. Dog leashes looped around insulated wire while their owners chatted on the sidewalk. Someone even balanced a portable speaker against one of the braces during a neighborhood barbecue, letting country music echo across my pasture until the cattle drifted away from their usual grazing area. None of it caused permanent damage, but every single item reminded me that respect disappears one small excuse at a time. Linda Crawford never touched the fence herself when I happened to be watching. She did something much more effective. She gave everyone permission. At monthly homeowners association meetings, she referred to the strip along my ranch as a neighborhood gathering edge, a phrase that sounded official enough for people to stop questioning it. She spoke with complete confidence, waving neatly printed maps and smiling as if she were doing everyone a favor. The subdivision had grown so quickly that many of the newer families assumed she knew exactly where every property line ended. After all, she was the homeowners association president. Why would anyone doubt her? One Saturday morning I watched from the barn, while Linda led a walking group down the sidewalk wearing spotless white sneakers and carrying an insulated water bottle with the neighborhood logo printed across the side. She stopped directly beside my fence, pointed toward the open pasture, and laughed about how beautiful the ranch looked now that the community had brought a little life to it. Several people clipped lightweight jackets onto the wire while stretching before their walk. One man tied his Labrador's leash to a fence post and wandered 20 yards away to answer a telephone call. I climbed into my utility vehicle and drove over slowly, keeping my voice calm because getting angry never convinces reasonable people. I explained again that livestock fencing was active ranch equipment, not public furniture. Most of the walkers immediately removed their belongings and apologized. Linda did not. She folded her arms, glanced at the fresh warning signs, and smiled the same rehearsed smile I had already learned to recognize. She said the signs looked dramatic for such a friendly neighborhood. Then she added that nobody had ever experienced a problem, so perhaps I was exaggerating the risks. That sentence stayed with me longer than she probably intended. Nobody had experienced a problem because I spent hours making sure everything stayed safe. Every inspection, every maintenance log, every repaired insulator existed so nothing unexpected would happen. The system worked because I respected it. What unsettled me was how easily Linda confused safety with permission. Later that afternoon, I reviewed the security camera footage I had recently installed near the main gate. The cameras were originally meant to monitor coyotes during calving season, but they now captured something else entirely. Groups of neighbors casually walking onto the edge of my property, moving warning signs to hang blankets more conveniently, and even lifting the lower wire to slide coolers underneath before weekend picnics. Nobody appeared malicious. They simply behaved as though the fence belonged to everyone except the man who built it. Watching those recordings in the quiet of my workshop, surrounded by the smell of machine oil and fresh cedar shavings, I realized polite conversations had accomplished exactly one thing. They had created a detailed timeline proving that every request, every warning, and every opportunity to respect private property had already been given. The turning point arrived on the first Saturday in May, the kind of warm Texas morning when the air already carried the promise of 90 degrees before breakfast. I was replacing a weather sensor near the north pasture when I noticed an unusual number of cars filling the subdivision parking lot. Bright balloons floated above the clubhouse, folding tables lined the sidewalks, and children raced between food trucks while music drifted across the open fields. Their annual spring neighborhood fair had arrived. I thought nothing of it until I drove along the fence line and found fresh footprints crossing the grass toward my property. The smell of grilled burgers mixed with blooming wildflowers as voices grew louder with every passing minute. By noon, the fence looked less like ranch equipment and more like the back wall of an outdoor laundry service. Blankets stretched between posts. Jackets hung from insulated wire. Folding wagons rested against support braces. Someone had even tied colorful ribbons around 2 corner posts for decoration. I parked my truck, took several photographs, and walked toward the gathering with my phone recording quietly in my shirt pocket. I greeted everyone politely and reminded them that they were using private ranch equipment designed for livestock containment. Most people looked embarrassed. A few quietly removed their belongings without saying a word. Then Linda stepped forward carrying a clipboard as though she had been waiting for the moment. She smiled at the crowd before looking directly at me. She said I was disrupting a family event over something as harmless as hanging blankets for an afternoon. Several residents nodded because they had only heard her version of the story for months. I pointed toward the large yellow warning signs mounted every 50 feet. Linda barely glanced at them before saying they were unnecessary because the fence had never caused anyone trouble. Hearing those words while standing less than 10 feet from 3 clearly visible warning signs felt almost surreal. I asked everyone one final time to remove their belongings. Instead of answering me, Linda turned back toward the crowd and joked that ranch owners sometimes forgot they had neighbors now. Laughter rolled through the group. Someone clapped. Another family walked over carrying more towels and casually draped them across the wire as though my request had never happened. I did not argue. I simply took more photographs, noted the time, and returned to my truck. As I drove away, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. I expected to see frustration. Instead, I saw something else. Calm. The kind that only comes after realizing every reasonable option has already been exhausted. Back at my workshop, I opened the folder on my computer labeled fence documentation. Inside were inspection reports, installation permits, maintenance records, dated photographs, security footage, copies of electronic mail messages, certified letters, and county property surveys. I added the new photographs from that afternoon, carefully labeling each file with the exact time and location. Then I noticed something I had almost overlooked. Several of the newest security videos clearly showed people removing the reflective warning signs before hanging blankets, then placing the signs back after they finished. I replayed the clips 3 times in complete silence except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the distant calls of cattle outside. That was the moment I stopped thinking about winning an argument. From then on, everything became about documenting choices, because there is a world of difference between someone making an honest mistake and someone deliberately ignoring every warning placed directly in front of them. The next Monday morning, I made myself one simple promise. I was finished trying to convince people who had already decided the rules did not apply to them. If anyone expected another emotional conversation across the fence line, they were going to be disappointed. Instead, I drove into the county seat just after sunrise with a folder nearly 2 inches thick resting on the passenger seat beside me. The courthouse smelled like polished wood and old paper, the kind of place where facts carried more weight than opinions. My first stop was the Agricultural Extension Office. I asked an inspector to review my entire livestock containment system from beginning to end. He spent almost 3 hours walking every section of the fence with me under the bright Texas sun, checking grounding rods, measuring pulse output, examining insulators, verifying warning sign placement, and confirming that the Energizer operated exactly within state recommendations for cattle fencing. When he finished, he signed the inspection report, shook my hand, and told me that everything exceeded the required safety standards. That document became the newest page in my growing file. My second stop was the county clerk's office, where I requested certified copies of my property survey and the original easement records. The survey clearly showed that every fence post stood well inside my boundary line. The public sidewalk ended several feet away. There was no shared access, no community easement, and certainly no homeowners association authority over any portion of my fence. I added those certified copies to the folder as well. Back at the ranch, I upgraded every security camera to higher resolution models with overlapping views so no section of the fence remained unrecorded. Each camera synchronized automatically with an online time server, leaving precise timestamps that could not be questioned later. I also replaced every warning sign with larger reflective versions mounted at eye level, adding additional signs near the corners where foot traffic was heaviest. Their bright yellow surfaces practically glowed beneath truck headlights after sunset. Anyone approaching the fence would have to walk past multiple warnings before ever reaching the wire. A few days later, I mailed one final certified letter addressed directly to Linda Crawford and the Homeowners Association Board. The letter included copies of the inspection certificate, the property survey, photographs of the warning signs, and a respectful request that residents stop attaching personal belongings to agricultural equipment located on private property. I even highlighted the sections explaining that the fence operated exactly as designed for livestock management. The postal receipt showed the letter was delivered 2 days later. No response ever arrived. Instead, something unexpected happened. The following weekend, my cameras captured Linda standing beside the fence with several residents, pointing toward the warning signs while laughing. Although the cameras recorded no audio from that distance, her gestures spoke loudly enough. One resident shrugged, removed a warning sign from its mounting bracket, leaned it against the grass, and clipped a beach towel onto the wire before another neighbor hung 2 oversized blankets beside it. A few minutes later, the warning sign was placed back exactly where it had been. Watching the footage that evening, I did not feel angry anymore. I felt prepared. Every inspection had been completed. Every document had been signed. Every warning had been made impossible to miss. Whatever happened next would not begin because I failed to communicate. It would begin because someone deliberately chose to ignore every opportunity to do the right thing. The opportunity arrived sooner than I expected. Willow Creek Estates announced its annual summer community picnic, complete with food trucks, live music, family games, and what Linda proudly described in the neighborhood newsletter as expanded outdoor gathering areas along the scenic ranch border. I read that sentence twice while standing in my workshop, the smell of machine oil mixing with fresh-cut cedar as the afternoon breeze drifted through the open doors. Scenic ranch border. That was apparently the newest name for my private fence line. I folded the newsletter, placed it inside my documentation folder, and checked the maintenance calendar hanging above my workbench. By pure coincidence, the scheduled monthly inspection of my livestock fencing fell on the very same Saturday morning as the community picnic. Ranch equipment does not care about neighborhood events. It follows maintenance schedules. Every 4 weeks, I inspected the Energizer, tested grounding performance, confirmed proper pulse output, and documented every reading in a bound maintenance log. I had followed that exact routine for 2 years without missing a single inspection. I saw no reason to change it now. Friday afternoon, I completed one last walk along the property. Every warning sign was clean, securely mounted, and impossible to overlook. Fresh reflective lettering caught the late afternoon sunlight from more than 100 feet away. I verified each security camera angle, synchronized the recording system, replaced one memory card with a new sealed unit, and photographed every section of the fence before leaving for the evening. My maintenance checklist filled another page. Time, date, weather conditions, voltage readings from the previous inspection. Everything recorded exactly as always. Before going inside, I stopped near the main gate and listened to the familiar clicking rhythm of the fence energizer. Tick, pause, tick, calm, predictable, reliable. The sound reminded me of my grandfather's old pocket watch. Consistent systems only surprise people who refuse to pay attention. Early Saturday morning, I brewed a pot of coffee before sunrise and began my inspection exactly at 7 o'clock. The air carried the cool scent of dew settling across the pasture while cattle moved lazily through the tall grass. I checked insulators one by one, tightened 2 loose connectors left behind by strong spring winds, and replaced a weathered grounding clamp that had reached the end of its service life. At 8:30, I completed the final electrical test using my calibrated fence meter. The pulse output matched the recommended operating range recorded on every previous inspection report. I signed the maintenance log, stored the meter inside my truck, and closed the toolbox. My work was finished long before the first food truck entered the subdivision. Around mid-morning, music began floating across the fields. Children's laughter echoed beyond the sidewalk while folding tables appeared beside the clubhouse. From the shade of my equipment barn, I could already see colorful blankets, oversized beach towels, and camping chairs being carried toward the fence line. I did not walk over. I did not wave anyone away. Every conversation had already happened. Every certified letter had already been delivered. Every warning sign remained exactly where I had installed it. The only thing left for me to do was continue feeding my cattle and let the cameras record whatever choices people decided to make for themselves. Sometimes the strongest response is not creating a trap at all. It is quietly allowing a well-documented system to perform the ordinary job it was built to do while everyone else convinces themselves that the rules somehow stopped applying the moment they became inconvenient. By 11 o'clock, the subdivision sounded more like a county fair than a quiet neighborhood. Country music drifted over the pasture, children laughed somewhere beyond the oak trees, and the smell of smoked brisket carried across the fence with every warm gust of wind. From the shade of my equipment barn, I could see families spreading picnic blankets across the grass while volunteers arranged coolers and folding tables. At first, everything stayed on their side of the sidewalk. Then Linda Crawford arrived. Even from a distance, I recognized the confident way she walked, greeting people with broad smiles and pointing toward my fence as though she were introducing the main attraction. A few minutes later, the cameras captured exactly what I expected. One resident lifted a warning sign from its bracket and leaned it against the grass. Another family carried oversized beach towels directly to the fence. Bright clothespins appeared almost immediately. Blankets stretched across multiple sections of wire until the steel strands nearly disappeared beneath colorful fabric. Someone tied a decorative banner between 2 posts. Another person rested a folding chair against one of the braces. It looked less like a livestock barrier and more like a backyard clothesline. I never left the barn. I simply watched the live camera feed on the tablet mounted beside my workbench while finishing routine maintenance on a feed mixer. The fence continued operating exactly as it had every other day of the year. Tick, pause, tick, calm, predictable. Then came the moment everyone would later describe differently, even though the cameras recorded every second. A woman reached toward one of the blankets, apparently trying to straighten it after a breeze twisted the corner. She immediately stepped backward with a surprised gasp, dropping the cloth onto the grass. Nothing dramatic happened. She was clearly startled more than anything else. 2 nearby residents instinctively let go of the towels they were clipping onto the wire, and the damp fabric slid into the muddy edge of my pasture. Someone shouted for everyone to move away from the fence. Within seconds, dozens of people backed away at once, staring first at the wire, then at the bright yellow warning signs that had suddenly become impossible to ignore. Linda hurried over, gesturing toward the fence while several residents pointed directly at the signs she had dismissed for months. One man walked over, picked up the warning sign that had been removed earlier, and quietly reattached it to the post without saying a word. That simple gesture told me everything I needed to know. They had seen the signs all along. Minutes later, a county deputy arrived after someone requested assistance. I walked over carrying my inspection binder before the deputy even reached the fence. He asked me a few calm questions, then examined the warning signs, reviewed the inspection certificate, checked the maintenance log completed that very morning, and finally watched several minutes of security footage inside my truck. The video showed residents removing the warning sign before hanging blankets, then using the fence despite repeated notices posted along the property line. The deputy nodded slowly, handed my documents back, and thanked me for keeping such detailed records. He then spent several minutes speaking with Linda and a few homeowners while occasionally glancing toward the fence. From where I stood, I could not hear the conversation, but I did not need to. The expressions on their faces changed from confidence to quiet realization. For the first time since Willow Creek Estates had been built beside my ranch, nobody argued that the fence belonged to the neighborhood. They simply gathered their belongings, folded their blankets, and walked away, leaving the wire exactly as they had found it, quietly clicking beneath the Texas sun. Monday morning arrived with an unfamiliar kind of quiet. The walking trail beside my ranch was almost empty, and for the first time in months there was nothing hanging from the fence except the warning signs that had been there all along. The only sounds were meadowlarks calling across the pasture and the steady clicking of the Energizer as my cattle grazed without paying any attention to the drama that had unfolded over the weekend. I figured the story would fade away after a few days. I was wrong. Around 9 o'clock my telephone rang. It was the County Code Enforcement Office asking if I could provide copies of my inspection records, maintenance logs, property survey, and the security footage the deputy had referenced in his report. I sent everything electronically before lunch. By Tuesday afternoon another request arrived, this time asking for the certified letter I had mailed to the Homeowners Association several weeks earlier along with proof of delivery. Fortunately, every document was already organized inside the same folder I had been building for months. Nothing had to be recreated because everything already existed before the incident. That preparation made all the difference. 2 days later, one of my neighbors from the subdivision knocked on my front gate carrying a covered baking dish. He introduced himself as Daniel, apologized for believing the stories he had been told, and admitted he had never realized the warning signs had been removed before people started hanging things on the fence. He said several residents had watched portions of the deputy's body camera footage after the report became available, and many were shocked to learn how many polite requests had been ignored long before anyone contacted law enforcement. Over the next week, more neighbors stopped by. Some apologized. Others simply asked questions about ranch fencing because they genuinely wanted to understand why it existed and how it worked. Those conversations felt completely different from the ones I had tried having months earlier. They were based on curiosity instead of assumptions. Meanwhile, the Homeowners Association board scheduled a special meeting. I was not invited, but judging from the conversations happening along the sidewalk, attendance was much larger than usual. Residents had started asking uncomfortable questions. Why had the board ignored certified letters? Why were people encouraged to use private ranch equipment after repeated warnings? Why had community newsletters described the fence as though it belonged to everyone? Those questions spread faster than any rumor ever had. About 2 weeks later, I received another certified letter. This one was noticeably shorter than the earlier notices I had sent. It came from the Homeowners Association attorney acknowledging my property boundaries and confirming that future community communications would remind residents to respect adjacent private agricultural property. There was no admission of wrongdoing, but there did not need to be. The letter quietly abandoned every claim that had fueled months of unnecessary conflict. Linda Crawford remained unusually absent after that. Her morning walking groups disappeared, and the neighborhood newsletters suddenly focused on landscaping projects instead of scenic ranch borders. The greatest surprise was not that people stopped using my fence. It was how quickly everything changed once documentation replaced opinions. Every inspection report, every photograph, every warning sign, every certified receipt had become another piece of a story that no amount of confident speeches could rewrite. In the end, the fence never defeated anyone. It simply continued doing the ordinary job it had always done while the truth slowly caught up with the people who had spent months pretending not to see it. By the time autumn settled across the Texas prairie, the entire dispute had faded into something the cattle never noticed and the fence never remembered. Every morning I still followed the same routine my father had taught me years ago. Coffee before sunrise. A slow drive along the pasture. One hand resting on the steering wheel while the other checked posts, insulators, and gates that had stood through thunderstorms, droughts, and more seasons than most of the houses next door had even existed. The smell of damp earth mixed with fresh hay as the first light rolled over the hills, and the familiar clicking of the fence echoed across the fields with the same steady rhythm it had always kept. Tick, pause, tick. Nothing about the equipment had changed. The only thing that changed was the way people looked at it. Walkers still used the sidewalk every evening, but now they stayed on the public path where it belonged. Parents pointed out the warning signs to their children instead of ignoring them. Dog owners kept their leashes in their hands instead of looping them around steel posts. Every now and then someone waved as they passed, and I always waved back. Respect has a quiet way of rebuilding itself when people finally understand where the boundary really is. One afternoon Daniel stopped by again, this time with his young son riding in the passenger seat. The little boy had been asking questions about ranch life, so I invited them inside the front pasture to watch the cattle from a safe distance. His eyes lit up as a curious calf wandered closer, and for nearly half an hour we talked about fencing, livestock, weather, and why ranches work the way they do. Before they left, Daniel smiled and admitted he had lived beside agricultural land for almost 5 years without ever learning a single thing about it until everything happened. That conversation meant more to me than any apology ever could. Knowledge lasts longer than embarrassment. A few weeks later, I noticed something else that made me smile. The Homeowners Association had installed its own community clothesline area behind the clubhouse, complete with sturdy metal posts and signs explaining proper use. Apparently, the neighborhood had finally decided that if people wanted a place to hang blankets after pool parties or community events, they should build one instead of borrowing someone else's property. It was such a simple solution that I found myself wondering why nobody had suggested it from the beginning. Sometimes common sense arrives only after unnecessary conflict has finally run out of excuses. Looking back now, people occasionally ask whether I regret standing my ground. My answer is always the same. I never fought my neighbors. I never changed the way my fence worked. I never set out to embarrass anyone. I simply refused to apologize for maintaining equipment that had served my family's ranch responsibly for generations. Every inspection, every photograph, every certified letter, every warning sign, and every quiet decision to stay calm mattered far more than one emotional argument ever could. That is the lesson my grandfather left behind with every fence post he planted into this Texas soil. Property lines are not created by anger. They are protected by patience, preparation, and the willingness to let the truth speak louder than pride. Even now, whenever the evening breeze carries the scent of cedar across the pasture, and I hear that familiar ticking fade into the sunset, I smile because justice was never hidden inside electricity. It was hidden inside every warning that people chose to ignore until the day they finally decided to read it.